How did Korea become divided? North Korea, the Hermit Kingdom, is one of the world's strictest and most feared nations. We've had a handful of videos about North Korea before, how their supreme leader leads, and how to escape from the country. But how did North Korea come to be in the first place? Why did it separate from South Korea? Why are there two Koreas in the world? In this video, we'll talk about why North and South Korea split, and the stories behind it. The unity of the whole Korea started in the 7th century under the Silla dynasty. In the following decades, other dynasties took hold of the country. In 1392, the Joseon dynasty took over the whole Korea peninsula after the fall of the Goryeo dynasty. They led the country for 500 years until the Japanese took over Korea in 1910. But how did it happen? Well, in 1882, as advised by China, Korea entered into an agreement with the United States called the Treaty of Peace, Amity, Commerce, and Navigation. From the name alone, you can already see that Korea will be in an ideal situation because of the treaty that Korea entered. But there's a little problem, because it was China that helped Korea. It is stated in the treaty that even if Korea is an independent country, it is still a tributary state of China. In other words, China interfered with how Korea was run and significantly influenced the nation. Eventually, Chinese soldiers began appearing in Korea. In 1884, the Sino-Japanese War exploded, a massive war against China and Japan. In the end, China lost the battle, and Japan took control of Korea. Korea experienced tough times under the Japanese. Koreans were not allowed to study their country's history or even their own language. Everything they learned was about Japan. When World War II started, Japan still owned Korea, and they were only forced to let it go when it ended. In 1945, Hitler was slowly losing the war, and his ally, Japan, was a part of it. The Soviet Union attacked the Japanese in Korea and made them surrender. When this happened, the US thought that the Soviet Union might conquer Korea, and they did not want this to happen. Thus, they made a move. Ultimately, the US and the Soviet Union agreed to divide the Korean peninsula because the Soviet Union used the northern route when they entered and had a small base. They took this part of Korea after they defeated the Japanese. On the other hand, the US will establish a base in the southern part of Korea. At that time, the division of Korea was a quick action for the two powerhouse countries, and they intended to unite the citizens of Korea under one government. But while the country was split between the US and the Soviet Union, two countries with different philosophies on leadership and governance, they influenced the people in their respective parts of Korea. The ones in the north supported the strict communism of the Soviets. At the same time, Koreans from the south did not like it and preferred capitalism, which the US introduced. It became harder for Korea to unite when a Cold War developed between the US and the Soviet Union. Because the two countries' relationship fell apart, the chances of the two divisions of Korea reuniting also went down with them. In 1947, the United Nations wanted to officiate an election in Korea to be under one government, but it fell through. The Soviets convinced the Koreans in the northern part to boycott the polls. The Koreans from the south did not like this. Thus, in 1948, with the help of the US, they established their own government in Seoul, an anti-communist government that they would call the Republic of Korea, or ROK. The newly elected Syngman Rhee was to lead it. This is how the South Korean government started. The Koreans from the north did not want to be left behind though. They also established their own government in Pyongyang, and just like the Soviet Union, it was a strict communist government. For their leader, the North chose a former communist guerrilla, and it was none other than Kim Jong-un's grandfather, Kim Il-sung. Kim Il-sung became the first premier of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or what we now know as North Korea. After 1 year, both the Americans and the Soviets left Korea, but the situation still did not get better. In the following months, North and South Korea had small encounters, and in 1950, the Korean War officially exploded. It started when North Korea attacked the South with the help of the Soviets. The Soviets thought that if the North won and conquered South Korea, the whole country would be under a communist government, and the Soviet Union would have another ally. For 4 months, the North Korean soldiers successfully conquered the entire Korean peninsula. The UN did not like this, and they helped South Korea. Many nations also helped the South, including the US. The US bombed a few towns and cities in North Korea as retaliation. This is one of the reasons why the US and North Korea remain enemies today. In 1953, the war ended in an armistice, an agreement between the two to stop the fight. In total, the Korean War had 2.5 million casualties, and its conclusion was that the Demilitarized Zone, or DMZ, was established. Maybe you've heard of this in our previous video, but if you haven't, the DMZ is the long barrier that separates North Korea from South Korea. It is 250 kilometers long and serves as a buffer zone between the two nations. In the following decades, the two nations went on different paths. South Korea's relationship with the US and other Western countries helped improve their economy and became a democratic country. North Korea, on the other hand, remained a home for strict communism. In their history, 3 generations from one family have led the nation. It is also known as the Hermit Kingdom because of its isolation and careful protection of what's happening inside the country. The Korean Peninsula remains the base of the two countries today, and looking at the situation, it is doubtful that the two would be a part of one united Korea. What do you think? Is it still possible? Is it better for them to unite, or should we let them be divided? Who do you think was the real culprit for dividing Korea into 2 separate nations?